Hi, everyone. It's again Sohrab from Agile Academy. Welcome back to another episode of Getting to Know Our Ambassadors. Today, I'm hosting Markus Schmotz. Markus is a guy I've got to know recently and super happy to have him as one of our ambassadors. We will talk about his journey, in his Agile journey, basically, and where he started, what he's doing now. So, Markus, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks, Sohrab, for inviting me to this Get to Know the Ambassadors. Yes, we know each other for, I think, a little bit more than a year. But yeah, we've made that journey now even to Ambassador level 3. I think that's a point where we will come through in the end. So I'm super glad to be here and to tell my story.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Ambassador level 3 for a moment. I think you were one of the people that started out with the ambition to become an Ambassador level 3, and throughout the time that we knew each other, you also got engaged on higher levels within organizations. And what I really enjoyed, what you did was you documented really well the type of work that you've been doing, and the case studies that you ultimately submitted made the choice very easy to accept you as an Ambassador level 3. So cheers to you for that, Markus. Now, Markus, given that we have a short time box, right, and we love our time boxes, let's dive right in. And similar to all the other ambassadors, I want to start with where your journey started. So when was the first time you encountered agile ways of working, even if you might not have used the term by that time? With whom were you doing the work? What type of challenges were you facing? Walk me through the context where for the first time you started to acknowledge and then ultimately embrace this way of working.
I think there's two phases. I think when you say acknowledge this way of working was when, after my PhD, young physicist went into an engineering job, did R&D innovation, and there I was leading a project, 30 million capex invest, and we ran it into a wall full speed, right? So there was we've seen it, we sped on, and we really crashed the project. And this was run by really classical project management. In that moment, I realized, there must be a better way to get work done. And then I acknowledged that agility is a way to, be on time, be in budget, but not on scope, because you work more closely with the customer. And that was the moment when I started to deeply immerse myself into Kanban, into Scrum, into whatever was out there 20 years ago, and started to become an agile project manager. So this was my really first start. And in the end, in the PMO I was the only PM that got his projects done on time and in budget, but never in scope. And I think that's where this where this infection with the agile virus started. Looking back, I think this goes even further. This goes back to my father's story of being an entrepreneur, of being one who constantly challenges himself and tries to grow. But ultimately infected was running this capex, or this huge machine project, this huge machine that we built full head on into the wall and crashing it, and then finding there's a better way. From there, my journey took me away from agility for a bit. I went into lean. I led a lean transformation. In the end, 4,500 people, 30 production sites globally, where it's not only about getting tools into production, but it's also about the cultural difference between Asia and US and Europe. And there, getting this lean training made me realize that lean and agile, if we want to use these terms constantly, they are super similar, but they haven't talked to each other in a long while, right? So it appeared that agile developed and lean developed, but there's this connection missing. So I was building agile tools into the lean box, right? So I introduced a retrospective on the shop floor, for instance, right? How can we improve the lean work? And I think that all made it that I'm now thinking about agility not as here's tool 1, here's tool 2, here's tool 3, but more of how can we enable an organization to transform itself into something that's worth living in and that's really generating value for our customers.
So, Markus, a ton of things that you already shared where I made some notes for me to dive in deeper.
I've seen that.
And I want to start with something that might be a bit painful. But
Yeah, go ahead.
let's go back to that 30 million capex project that you ran into the wall. Walk me through what happened there. Why did you, and obviously not only you but others, why did this project ran into a wall? What happened? Now, with the wisdom that you have in hindsight.
Yeah, there's a funny story. We did a lessons learned at the end, and being still in that old mindset of, hey, we have to plan. My answer in that lessons learned was, if we only had more time to plan, we would not have run into the problem. So I think back then we were all smart guys, right? Super intelligent engineers. I think we did everything right in the context of knowledge we had back then. But we made our Gantt charts, we made our project plan and said, this happens there, that happens there. And we were always trying to adapt either the reporting or like what really happened by extra work of ours to make somehow that plan work, right? So that we still could show a green or at least orange light on the PowerPoint presentation at the monthly report. But by that, accumulating problems more and more and more, and maybe even hiding problems that then at one point were too big and really crashed. So I think we overvalued planning back then and thought if we are clever in planning and if we share those and communicate about those plans a lot, it would make the project more successful. But what we missed out was that running such a project always gives opportunities to change, to pivot, to make things differently. So the solution in the end we provided, like we got a second run on the project. So we reduced the scope. We had a second go from our CEO back then. And there we were more flexible in the ways that we went through the different stages of the project itself. So of course, there was also like an overarching plan. Like you have to plan in a way, but we were way more flexible in handling problems and also our time, what we do as project managers at that moment, what we delegate, and also early asking for help, right? I mean, having this red light on a project does not mean that you get killed in front of the steering committee. It's just a shout out, hey guys, I need help. I ran into a problem that I cannot handle myself. Is there anyone out there to help me, right? I think this was a misunderstanding also we had to say, oh, red is bad. No, it's simply a sign to say, I need help.
It's also, I like the fact how you put it, right? How you reframe what red means when you do your traffic light reporting. For me, it also means we ran into problems that we did not predict, right? And when you're facing uncertainty, there's a bunch of things that you cannot predict. So you have assumptions, and then your assumptions turn out to be wrong, right? That's how assumptions could be. There's always, you could say, a 50-50 chance for them being correct or being wrong. So being able, and that requires, and I think it's not to be underestimated how important it was that the CEO gave you another shot at that same project. Because depending on the person, right, many CEOs would not have done that. They would have like, oh, you should have just planned better. Now let's get even more traditional project management in place and so on and so forth. But probably that person, not knowing him personally, right, but probably that person also acknowledged, hey, the system and the way we do things is the issue, not the people that are doing the things. They're all smart guys, as you pointed out yourself, but the way they approached it, that's maybe an issue that we have, and let's try to do it in a different way. Now, the second thing, Markus, that I wrote down, you mentioned the term that a lot of people would get allergic reactions to.
Okay.
Agile project manager.
Yeah.
So I don't get an allergic reaction to that, but knowing a lot of people in the Agile community, they're like, there are no projects, and therefore there is no Agile project manager. So you referred to yourself as an Agile project manager, and I loved how you phrased it. You got your projects done in time and budget, but never in scope. Walk me through what was the life of an Agile project manager.
Well, maybe to break the ice for project management, I'm not saying that you not need project management, and also classical project management has its space, right? But you need to find the right problems to be solved by classical project management. back then, coming out of that project management bubble, I was looking for ways to do that. And the PMI offered an Agile Certified Practitioner, which is an Agile Project Manager certification. That was the first one I did, right? So if you look in my CV, you see that's the first thing I actually did. It was an Agile Project Management. But life as an Agile Project Manager is tough in a classical organization because you are the one to say, I need help. You are the one to asking the stupid questions. You are the one to being maybe not so prepared for the reporting, because I went into reporting and asked questions, right? So what's your expectation? Here are different options. How do you see that, right? I was trying to interact with also the shareholders on a different level than just setting that report out. So a little bit like the green dog in the house. But in the end, it wasn't so different, right? So I was still involved in that PMO. I was still one of the project managers in the end. I still had to walk through the standard routines. The guy running the PMO, fantastic leader back then, was one of the fellows that also worked on the PMP program for PMI and like pushed this to the next level and started incorporating agility into the PMP. So he also gave us the space to experiment a little bit in different ways. So there was, I think, enough seeds on the ground and enough nourishment on the grounds that also I was able to try things out, even though the life of an agile dude in a classical PMO is not always fun. Because, as I said, I would be asking questions. I would be doing things differently. I would do stand-ups. I would start with my team with a team charter and discuss how we want to interact, and not with a project plan on that's the scope, that's what we define, right? So being in my projects felt different for the people involved. But the feedback I gave was, hey, that's actually valuable for us to understand how we will communicate if something happens, right? So this prepares us for pivots, this prepares us for problem solving that inevitably will come over the course of the project.
No, I get it. I get it. But so the fact that, or what you pointed out, right, got them done in time and budget, but never in scope. Now, I want to deep dive on that a bit further. What were the reactions in the organizations when they saw, because you also mentioned you were the only one who got projects done in time and in budget, but never in scope. What was the reaction? Did that result in some kind of shifting mindset of more and more people acknowledging that, yes, there is a space for traditional project management, but many of the projects that we're addressing as an organization face a lot of uncertainty, complexity, whatever term you want to use, and therefore this other approach that Markus is using could benefit our organization?
I would say to an extent, yes. The organization I was in back then, I would now frame it as a scale up, right? So the CEO, Robert Keane, if he sees this episode, hi Robert, he started his business in a hotel room in Paris, right? Printing business cards. And then he grew within, 10, 15 years to a couple billion revenue a year. So this was like massively scaling business. So at the time I was in, there was never an issue of not getting resources. There was never an issue of not getting budget, right? So basically all the projects, even those that were late, had the ability to get a little bit more budget and to like also cross the line in a decent time, right? So there was not this struggle of Markus is doing things differently, so he's more successful. I was only not asking for more resources. But overall, we got all our projects done. So in this massively scaling and massively growing scale up, I think the way I worked didn't really transform the organization, that they adopted more agility per se, because I was not swimming along. I made some noise also, but since resources and money was not an issue in that fast growth, right? Also, the other project managers were successful, so it wasn't that I was standing out as the only light that shone across these PMO. The others were successful too, right? I have to be fair on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point that you point out, right? It's really like, what kind of constraints do we have in order to then, within those constraints, assess what type of approach is more successful or not. if the primary intention or the measure of success in an organization is all about whether we get projects done independent from sticking to the timeline and sticking to the budget, then yeah, it doesn't make a big difference that one person is sticking to the timeline and sticking to the budget, as long as all the other projects are getting done. But if you have resource constraints, which is the case for the vast majority of organizations, especially in times like these, right, where every organization is looking at every penny that they're spending, it becomes more important that an organization's approach to work can be more predictable towards being in time, being in budget,
Yeah,
and yes,
absolutely.
and being flexible in scope.
And
So
it's,
the last thing,
I think so.
go ahead, Mark.
It's also the problem itself, right? If you buy a machine from a vendor, you don't need to do this in an agile project management way, so to speak, right? But if you develop something where you don't even know how the solution looks like in this more complex space, this is where the strength comes in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the last thing from your introduction that caught my attention was you talked about lean. And you pointed out there are a lot of similarities, right? But the bridge had not been built at all, right? Those two communities you mentioned had not been talking to each other for a long time. Now, I would be interested in, where do you see the biggest differences between Agile and Lean?
The differences.
Yes.
Okay. So I think I want to differentiate between the lean that we see now in an organization and the lean that I believe was supposed to happen, because I think that's where the difference starts. So lean today, and that's what I want to refer to, I see more often as it's introducing tools in order to save money. Yeah. Operational excellence is one of these programs that typically is really closely connected to lean. Whereas agility, whatnot, has a really strong focus around the people involved, right? So this is people interactions over processes and tools. That's the core value. And I think the biggest gap happened when lean started to go down this, we only do tools, we do 5S, we do value stream mapping, whatever these tools are, they all have a space and they're all important. But at the core of lean back then was the undone chord, right? That's this line in Toyota production where the employee on the production line could stop the entire shop floor. And if there was a problem, everyone would gather and fix the problem, right? That was the core idea of lean, and also the environmental impact and being good to your neighbors and incorporating partners. That was the base of lean. I think the differences came now that agility moved out of that and kept that, hey, we have to put people in the center. We talk about customer centricity, people centricity, and all these buzzwords. But lean took that tool path. And I think that's where this biggest gap comes from right now, that I'm seeing, that lean is in many organizations, I'm not saying in all, but in a lot that I've seen, is only focusing on, hey, what tool can we apply in order to save a little bit more money, to save a little bit more resources, which is good things, right? I'm not saying don't do it. But what I'm saying is lean forgot at one point to really take the people in and to really empower and engage the people and bringing that end and chord back, because end and chords are super painful if you do them in production.
Yeah. And I think maybe you're referring to Western lean compared to Japanese lean, right?
Probably.
So the Toyota way really had the end on chord at its core. And for me, I always share this story of, this is an evolution of management where suddenly you decentralize decision making, because being allowed to pull the end on chord, that's a decentralized decision making. You're given decision making authority. And a lot of organizations did not copy the principles, but they copied certain tools and maybe some practices, and then they referred to this still as lean, but they basically bastardized the term to some extent. So that's great. Now, Markus, we started with your agile origins, right? Where did this all start? You've obviously been on a growth journey ever since, right? Becoming very curious about different things, including lean and building those bridges and extending your own toolbox and your understanding of the topics. What are you spending your time on today?
I think to make the pitch and also to make the statement clear, I'm not referring to myself as an agile project manager. I please want
I know, that was back then. That was back
then, yes. Now I mean, I'm a physicist by heart, right? So I did a PhD, and the main thing I learned doing physics was to think in systems and to see what's going behind the curtain, right? So this is, if you're in the Matrix trilogy in the movies, it's like seeing that code running down, right? So that's sometimes how I feel, and I don't want to be Neo, and I don't want to be the hero, but that's sometimes how I feel when I walk into an organization and see how everything is connected. So what I'm indulging myself in right now is, how can we shape and evolve an organization on a systematic level, by using everything that we know. This could be Kanban, Scrum, this could be Lean, this could be design thinking, the whole toolbox that's available. Do the cherry picking and build something that's really working, right? And not only from the perspective of Lean, or not only from the perspective of SAFe or scaled Kanban or what flight levels and whatnot, right? So I'm now deeply concerned with, we went to that phase in the market that there was SAFe and there's other scaled methods, and that's all these, hey, let's do this, there's a solution, let's implement it. But I believe each and every organization is different, and we need to tailor and adapt the solutions that work for that organization specific to that organization. And sticking to individual tools won't help. It might solve a problem at the start, but it won't help to bring that organization to an evolutionary step that it's really sustainable and self-contained and can grow itself. So in my work, I'm trying to bring all these worlds together: agility, Lean, my leadership experience, to form a system, or to help my clients form a system that's growing in itself and that's also fun and valuable for everyone to work in. So that's what's my focus on right now.
Yeah, no, I love the way that you framed it, right? Thinking about systems, but also talking about that the system will be growing, right? So there is no one target system that you create, and then they transition to that, and then check, they're done for the rest of their lives. It's really, if we think about the human body as a complex adaptive system, and organizations, now you come to this as a physicist, I come to this as a physician, as a medical doctor, right? It's really about having that living organism where it constantly improves.
Yeah,
exactly. Now, contrary to us as humans, we age. There is no way, I mean, you can postpone it to some extent, but you cannot, like, at least based on the current state of medicine, we cannot reverse it. And at some point we will be gone. But organizations don't have to have that destiny. They can create systems where they constantly reinvent themselves, reinvent the products they have, the business models they have, the culture they have, right? And I'm also curious about, how can we create those systems? Now, when you think about your area of focus, what does and I ask this specifically, what does a perfect client engagement look like for you? What would be the prerequisites for you to shine in the collaboration with one of your clients?
Wow, that's a super hard question to ask.
I know.
I think it's related to what you just said. So evolution is the mix between variation and selection, right? So you need to run different experiments to see which way it is going, and then select one as the next evolutionary ratchet to like onto, and then take the next step. And I think my perfect client engagement would be a client that can be a team, that can be an organization that is willing to spend the energy on variation, on experimentation, on seeing which one is the right fit for that organization, and then also have the guts to say, oh, now that's the thing we now lock into. That's the selection part, and then stick to it for a time, and from there do the next experimental tree and take the next leap. I think this would be the we sometimes talk about the growth mindset, but like having that mindset up front to say, yes, we know that this will be a path that won't take us to the solution within the next 1-2 months or 1-2 weeks. That's a journey we take, and we will have failures in between. And then, but we also know that at one point we will be better off, right? So I think that's a mindset that my ideal client would bring to say, yeah, I'm happy with experimentation. I'm happy with failure. We all fail, and we are certain that in the end we will be better off.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that you're a scientist. Talking about evolution and then breaking it down into variation and selection, and that's only something that we as scientists do. But
fair enough.
but I mean, it is growth mindset, but I think it's also more. It's being very in having like a clear intention that you have to make the choices, right? And so you have to make the choices starting out with what kind of experiments do we run? So contrary to what happens in nature, where there is just a change in the genome by variation, right? That's random, right? That's not a choice, at least not that we know of. But in our businesses, we can make the choices. Am I going to experiment with AI? Yes or no? It's a choice, right? So the experiment in itself, then the experiment design, again, that's a choice. You as a physicist know that, I know that. And then the interpretation of the results, that's again a choice. And ultimately, am I going to follow through on that path? Or am I going to change, right?
Exactly.
On another set of experiments. And even if I follow through, at what point in time am I going to run another experiment? And so this constant choice creation and then also selection, so making those decisions and not being too scared, too paralyzed to make them, I think that's something that you laid out beautifully. And I would also consider one of those customers as my perfect customer, because that's where I get interested in, where I'm passionate. Right?
Sure. I think that's where also outside perspective helps to like make these choices and make this selection of the experiment, right? I think that's where we as ambassadors come in as well, to say, hey, we have seen so many different things. We have engaged with so many different clients, and we can have a different look at your system and give you some options. The choice is yours in the end, right? We can support you on that journey to be making that choice and then also following through.
Absolutely. Markus, great words to end our conversation. We're approaching the end of our time box.
Awesome.
As usual, it was a pleasure. I'm already looking forward to our first meeting in person.
Yes.
And
me too.
Super happy to have you as an ambassador with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for building that whole program, Sohrab. Thanks.